Madam Chair, I would just like to state from the EPD opinion, as I understand this bill, it removes an unconstitutional provision that has been decided by the United States Supreme Court in 1992. And there was a federal judge in Georgia that enjoined one of my predecessors, Mr. Reheis, from enforcing it. And therefore we've got an unconstitutional provision in the Georgia statute. And that's all this bill does, to my knowledge right now, is removes that provision. It does not remove the protection that has existed for protecting a groundwater recharge area. Right or wrong, whether that was enough or not enough or whatever, it doesn't impact that. It basically says you have to have a liner and you have to have a leachate collection system. That is in the previous section. That is not being touched by this proposed bill. All this bill is proposing, as I understand it, and the part that I support, is removing a section of Georgia law that EPD cannot enforce anyway. No more and no less. Now, if this body or anyone else wants to have a very robust discussion about what that protection should be, or whether that was enough, or where these things should be cited, then that's a different story, and that would be a different bill. Can't address all of those at one time. The only thing I'm addressing is the particular provision that is before you, and that is removing an unconstitutional provision. You still have the protection not only of the liner and the leachate collection system, but the local government still have the protection that they have of their solid waste management plan, and that is that we do not permit anything that's not consistent with that particular plan. So, from my perspective, that's the EPD version.
Question?
The question that I was thinking about asking earlier, and I would think that the robust discussion on the implications that are left behind if we take this section out would be important, but what is the basis that the department uses for limiting the size of ground of a landfill?
I don't have any of those. I would have to get those and get them back to you. Let me address one thing though that you had in the predicate of that question. You said we would address the implications of removing this. There are none. The implication of removing it, it can't be enforced right now. You're removing something that can't exist.
Well, I do understand that, but it does.
So there are no implications of removing that provision.
So the court case that some of the people brought up earlier, it claimed that Section A did have implications, that it was used to stop the landfill.
It was used prior to the court deciding that that was unconstitutional, and that's what Michigan was trying to do, and that's when it went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's when it was. So prior to that, it was used and it was enforced. So now you have a provision that can't be enforced and so forth. So really, there is no implication of removing that.
Is there a volume that you think about that is the greatest capacity that any landfill could expand to? I mean, is there a standard art?
I would have to check with engineers and check with. I mean, that's a lot larger question than I'm prepared to address. I'd be glad to address it, but I'm not prepared to do so.
We'll do that at a later tape. We don't have time to do that today.
I think you started off by saying you would welcome a robust discussion of this topic, and I would think that would be important.
We may have one day.
For this bill.
Because the implications that you mentioned have to do with that discussion, not with this discussion. I'm trying to get us back focused on this bill and this discussion.
Right. Okay. Would you like to weigh in on this, Representative?
I have a question with the director.
All right.
Director, in layman's terms, would you explain to us exactly what you cannot enforce in this bill?
If there's a provision in a permit that says that the county could not, you could not expand or permit a landfill application, in other words, issue a permit that was over a significant groundwater recharge area that was prohibited prohibited from accepting waste from interstate commerce. It's that prohibition from interstate commerce. It's actually unfortunate that they use the language of the significant groundwater recharge area, because that's in the previous section. The only protection that Georgia provides now for that is the liner and the leachate collection system, and then the local government's ability in their solid waste management plan to place limitations on it. So it's that provision that would prohibit EPD from issuing a permit from a county that had the was applying for a permit, or counties that was accepting and had a provision that barred accepting waste from other counties outside that county, or that would affect interstate commerce. That's the provision we can't. We can enforce the liner, we can enforce the leachate collection system, and we can enforce, and we do, if it's not consistent with the local government's solid waste management plan. In other words, we don't issue that permit. Don't even start.
Okay, let's hear from, you have a quick follow-up, because we've got 2 more coming.
I just want to say that was probably the most complicated.
I appreciate that.
We are on the webcast. I do want to remind you, in case y'all need a new job at the comedy show or something. Representative Hudson.
She was first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative
Every
Drenner.
time, if I don't sit on that side.
Well, you know, I go to the right.
Judy, I'm gonna remind you when you're on webcam.
I'm afraid they already know it.
Wait a minute, I gotta get my math out here. I just want to get, and maybe you might be able to answer this, Madam Chair. This law was originally passed in 1981. Is that true? The lawsuit was passed in 1993. Is that correct? Based upon this particular letter? The decision? So we're talking about 18 years that this law has been on the books, and now why now?
I didn't bring it. It's 1995.
Why?
Actually, just so we get it correct, that the federal judge enjoined that in 1995.
Well, according to this letter,
Supreme Court.
Wait just a minute now.
The Supreme Court case was in 1992. I don't have a copy of the letter, so
Okay.
I don't know what it says. I'm just saying, because I have the cases right here in front of me.
Okay, so
Let's just say it's over 15 years.
it's over 15 years, and I know that you've not had your job. Madam Chair, a follow-up question if possible.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you've not had this job for 15 years.
Thank goodness.
Or you'd be,
Completely false.
yes. I wasn't going to say that. Why now? From your perspective.
From my perspective, I'm here because someone submitted this bill and someone asked me my opinion on it. My opinion is that anytime we have an unconstitutional provision in the code, then we should remove it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Can I
Okay, I got one. So, sir, I'm not taking questions from the audience. I apologize, but we're moving into the hour-and-a-half mark here. Representative Buckman, do you have something to add here?
I'm gonna do my best. It's my understanding, when I look at, no, I promise. You wanna know if it was IBT, and I promise it's not. But when I look at this, and what I think I know from the history, the whole concept of paragraph A was that most of the counties were doing their own landfilling back then. There were like 80% of the landfills were public landfills, and maybe 15 to 20 might have been private.
Is there a question?
Yeah, that's coming. Just I gotta set it up. Then you, no. And now it has split. It's mostly private landfills and very few public landfills. But this was particularly for those smaller county landfills to say, okay, if you are doing your county a service and providing landfill space and you happen to encroach on a recharge area and you're not accepting anybody but your own waste, then we're not going to be so strict about the recharge area. But if you become commercial, then the rules were going to be different. Isn't that part of what that paragraph says? And if you haven't read it lately, it's right there.
Well, I've read it plenty lately, and
I mean, but I know the interstate commerce is the thing that's unconstitutional.
correct.
But I think there's another piece that said that talks about the recharge area and allowing those little county landfills to have a little more flexibility than the mega commercial landfills.
I don't know
Because it
that.
talks about in that last sentence.
Okay,
All right, I'll stop there.
good, good. I think we also have an amendment that we need to consider, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna take one, yeah, please.
Madam Chairman, at this time, I'd make a motion that we table this
Second.
Senate Bill 22.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.